You walk into your doctor's office carrying 15 months of food journals, 3 fitness apps worth of data, and the quiet desperation of someone who has done everything right and still gained weight. The appointment lasts 12 minutes. Your doctor glances at your charts, looks up and says, "Just lose weight, eat less, move more, maybe try cutting carbs." If you push back, if you try to explain that you've already tried that you're eating 1,200 calories a day and still can't lose a pound, you might get the sympathetic head tilt, the one that says they don't quite believe you. You leave that office feeling like your struggle doesn't matter, like you're failing at something that should be simple. I know this moment because I watched my sister Selena live it over and over again. And I'm someone who spent a decade inside the biotech industry developing metabolic treatments. So when that advice failed her, I knew it wasn't because she was lazy or undisciplined or secretly eating more than she admitted. The advice itself is biologically broken for PCOS bodies. And in this video, I'm going to show you why. My name is Dr. Elena Hayes. Until a few years ago, I was the clinical director at a biotech firm in Basel, working on metabolic therapies worth millions in development. I had the career I'd worked towards since university. My parents were proud. The work was intellectually stimulating. But I had a problem I couldn't shake. Every few months, my sister Selena would call me crying after another failed diet attempt or a mean comment that she received. Another doctor telling her to just try harder. Another month where she'd done everything right and gained 3 pounds anyway. And I knew the science. I knew why she was struggling. But the medical system she was navigating had no way to actually help her. And watching that gap killed me. In my day job, I was seeing a pattern repeat itself in clinical trials. Women with PCOS would enter studies for metabolic medications. They'd follow every instruction perfectly. Their compliance rates were incredible. And their results would be significantly worse than women without PCOS on identical programs. The medical community's response? Focus on the patients who responded well. The PCOS patients became statistical noise, outliers that complicated the data. Nobody was asking the question that kept me up at night. Why is metabolic intervention failing these specific bodies? The problem wasn't the patients. We were using the wrong approach for their specific biology. Most people don't realize this, but doctors learn an enormous amount about acute conditions and very little about chronic metabolic dysfunction. They learn to diagnose PCOS based on a checklist: irregular periods, elevated androgens, polycystic ovaries on the ultrasound. 2 out of 3 of the criteria and you get the diagnosis. But then what? The standard approach is birth control to regulate periods, maybe metformin for insulin resistance, and vague advice to lose weight through diet and exercise. If that sounds familiar to you, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But anyway, what they don't learn, forget, or dismiss is that PCOS changes how your body processes energy, stores fat, regulates hunger, and responds to stress. All of it. They're trained to view it through a reproductive lens because it shows up as menstrual irregularities. But here's the thing. PCOS isn't primarily a reproductive condition that happens to affect your weight. It's a metabolic condition that happens to affect reproduction. That distinction changes everything. When you treat it as a reproductive problem, you get prescriptions that manage symptoms but don't address the underlying metabolic chaos. When you treat it as a metabolic problem, suddenly things make sense. In my years working on insulin sensitizer programs, I saw how insulin resistance creates a cascade. Elevated insulin signals your body to store fat, especially around your abdomen. That visceral fat produces inflammatory compounds. Those inflammatory compounds worsen insulin resistance. It's a self-perpetuating cycle, and I saw it play out in lab data over and over. I saw how high insulin suppresses your satiety hormones and amplifies your hunger hormones. Not a little bit, significantly enough that your hunger genuinely is more intense than what someone without PCOS experiences on the same calorie deficit. I learned that women with insulin-resistant PCOS can have a metabolic rate that's suppressed by 15 to 20% compared to women of the same weight without PCOS. Think about that. If the standard advice says you need 1,500 calories a day to lose weight, but your metabolic rate is 20% lower, you'd actually need 1,200 calories to get that same deficit. Except nobody told you that. They just gave you the standard advice and expected it to work. The foundational assumption of eat less, move more is that your body operates like a simple machine. You put calories in through food, you burn calories through metabolism and activity, burn more than you consume, lose weight. It's physics. Should be straightforward, right? Except human bodies aren't simple machines. They're complex complex adaptive systems with feedback loops and hormone signals that completely change the equation. And this is where it gets messy. When you eat carbs, your blood sugar rises. Your pancreas releases insulin to help your cells absorb that glucose. But when you have insulin resistance, your cells don't respond properly. So your pancreas produces more insulin to compensate. That elevated insulin does several things at once. It signals your fat cells to store energy and stops them from releasing stored fat. Even in a calorie deficit, that high insulin makes it incredibly difficult for your body to actually burn fat. It suppresses leptin, your satiety hormone, the hormone that tells your brain, we have enough energy, we're not hungry. When leptin signaling is suppressed, you never feel truly satisfied after meals. It amplifies ghrelin, your hunger hormone. With elevated insulin, that signal is maxed out even when you've just eaten. And high insulin promotes inflammation throughout your body. That chronic inflammation interferes with thyroid function, disrupts cortisol patterns, and makes your cells even more insulin resistant. This is why you may eat a perfectly reasonable lunch, chicken, vegetables, maybe some rice, and then an hour later you're standing in front of the pantry genuinely starving. Not just, oh, a snack would be nice, hungry, actually starving in a way that feels desperate and slightly unhinged. Your coworkers ate the same lunch and they're fine until dinner. You're just trying to make it to 3 p.m. without eating your stapler. And when you do give in and eat something, there's this specific type of guilt because you feel like you shouldn't be this hungry. You just ate. A normal person wouldn't need more food so soon. So clearly you're doing something wrong. You lack self-control. You're weak. But that's not what's happening at all. Your hunger hormones are legitimately screaming at you in a way that other people's aren't. Your body is getting signals that don't match reality, and you're trying to logic your way through a hormonal flood. The cycle compounds. So when your doctor tells you to just eat less, what they're actually saying is use willpower to override hormonal signals that are screaming at you to eat. Ignore hunger that's genuinely more intense than what other people experience. Maintain a calorie deficit even though your body is actively preventing fat burning. And do this perfectly every day for months or years. This is why willpower alone doesn't work. It's not a character issue. It's biology. Telling a woman with PCOS to just eat less is like telling someone with a broken fuel gauge to just drive carefully. The internal measurement system is giving false readings. But it actually doesn't stop there. When you follow medical advice perfectly and it doesn't work, the implied message is that you must just not actually be following it, right? I've seen food logs from women eating 900 calories a day, 900, and they were still not losing weight or losing it so slowly that it felt pointless. When they go back to their doctors and report this, the response was often, well, you must be underestimating your portions. Try tracking more carefully, as if the problem was their measurement accuracy and not the approach itself. This creates shame and self-blame that's almost as damaging as the metabolic dysfunction. You start to internalize the failure. If it works for everyone else, then the reason it's not working for you must be because you're weak, because you lack discipline. Elena told me once that she felt like a fraud. She was a teacher teaching kids about healthy choices, but she couldn't control her own weight. She felt like everyone must think that she didn't practice what she preached. That shame is so heavy, and nobody deserves this. Because the truth is, she was fighting a battle with a biological disadvantage that nobody had explained to her. She was just trying to win a game where the rules were different for her body, but she'd only been given the standard rulebook. Your body is not broken. I know it feels that way. When you do everything right and you still don't see results, it's natural to conclude that something is wrong with you. But what if your body is actually responding exactly as it should, given the signals that it's receiving? The problem isn't that your body is defective. The problem is that the signals are scrambled. Think of your body as a system trying to maintain balance. It's getting inputs, hunger hormones, satiety hormones, insulin signals, cortisol levels, and it's making decisions based on those inputs. When you have PCOS, those inputs are sending contradictory messages. Your body is being told, store fat, we're in an emergency. At the same time, it's being told, burn energy, we need more fuel. So instead of trying to force your body into submission through restriction and willpower, what if we focused on restoring the signals? What if instead of fighting your hunger with willpower, we addressed why your hunger hormones are dysregulated? What if instead of forcing fat burning through extreme calorie deficits, we addressed why your insulin is preventing it? This is the approach I built for my sister after watching her struggle for years. When Selena had another breakdown in my kitchen, I think it was after Weight Watchers told her that she needed to commit more fully, I made a decision. I was going to use everything I'd learned in a decade of metabolic research to build her something that actually addressed the biology of what was going wrong. I spent my nights and weekends diving through PubMed research, not looking for trendy diets, but for studies about insulin resistance, inflammation, and hormone regulation in PCOS. I looked at what we did in the clinical trials that worked, what interventions improved insulin sensitivity, what dietary approaches reduced inflammation without triggering the stress response, what types of movement improved the markers without spiking cortisol. I built something that addressed multiple systems at once, nutrition strategies designed to improve insulin sensitivity, not just reduce calories, movement patterns that built metabolic health without overtaxing the stress response, sleep and stress management because cortisol dysregulation is part of the PCOS cascade. But most importantly, I built it with flexibility. Sustainable change doesn't come from perfect compliance with rigid rules. It comes from understanding your body well enough to make good decisions most of the time. Within 3 months, Selena lost the weight that had been stuck for 2 years. Her energy came back, her cycles became regular for the first time since adolescence. But what struck me most was what she said. I finally feel like my body is on my side again. I ran a quiet pilot program with 6 other women. The results were consistent, not because I discovered a miracle cure, but because we were finally addressing the biology instead of treating the symptoms with generic advice. You might ask yourself, what's so different? And if it was that simple, why don't we hear about this often? Well, I tried to bring this to my company. I presented the pilot data to my CMO, hoping that we could develop this into a patient support program. He told me that it was a nice hobby project, but it wouldn't move the needle for our Series B investors. Patient support programs don't generate the revenue that pharmaceutical development does. That's when I understood the medical system isn't designed to solve chronic metabolic problems. It's designed to treat acute conditions with prescriptions and procedures. There's no business model for the sustained support that actually helps people with PCOS. That was it for me. I did something that really terrified me at the time, but felt like the best thing to do. I quit my job. I left the security of my biotech career and I built the support program myself because I'd rather answer the quiet questions women type into Google at 2 a.m. than satisfy investor demands that have nothing to do with actually helping people. So, if you're here, let's say you've been following standard medical advice and it hasn't worked. If you spent months or years eating less and moving more and still struggling, if you started to believe that maybe you're just supposed to be this way, you don't need to try harder. You need a different approach. You need someone who understands that PCOS isn't a willpower problem. It's a metabolic signaling problem. You need tactics based on what actually works for insulin-resistant bodies, not generic advice designed for healthy metabolisms. You need support that doesn't shame you for being hungry or tired or having a bad week. And you need to understand what's actually happening in your body so that you can make informed decisions. This is what I built in the Keystone Weight Loss Protocol. It's not another diet that restricts your calories and leaves you starving. It's not another program that exhausts you without results. It's metabolic restoration using the same evidence-based systems biology approach that I used in clinical research, combined with the support that the medical system so often lacks. Because the science matters tremendously, but so does the human support. The tactics matter, but so does feeling heard and believed. You need both the precision of systems biology and the understanding of someone who gets it. If you're tired of being told just to try harder, if you're exhausted from fighting your own body, if you're ready to understand what's actually happening and how to work with your biology instead of against it, I'd love to tell you more about the Keystone Protocol. You can find information in the description below about how the program works and whether it might be right for you. And if you found this video helpful, I create content every week specifically for women with PCOS, breaking down the science behind what's happening in your body and what actually works to address it. Your body isn't broken. You weren't lazy or undisciplined. You were just given the wrong operating manual for your specific biology. And once you have the right one, everything changes. I'll see you in the next one.